Another Sunday afternoon is here with us, and this is a signature show. And I'm Vin Martin Obiora Ilo. Well, like many other Nigerians, I'm so excited about the performance of our boys in that match between Nigeria and Iceland. But, that result actually brought out, the life of the average Nigerian. When the Eagles lost in their first match to Croatia, there was no negative word in the dictionary that was not thrown towards the Super Eagles. But on Friday, all that changed when the Eagles had beaten Iceland 2-0. And Musa, the man of the match, who scored the 2 goals, became the darling of every Nigerian, and even some women wanted to marry Musa like yesterday. Well, as they say, success has many relations and failure is an orphan. Congratulations to the Nigerian team. We're praying and hoping that they will prevail over Argentina. Also yesterday, the APC had their long-awaited controversial convention, which has thrown up a new leadership in the APC. We congratulate the APC, and we hope that with this election, we'll see a more coordinated party, a more cooperative party, a more supportive party to the executive, which obviously should impact on the performance of the APC government. Well, it's almost 2 weeks since Mr. President extended his gesture to MKO Abiola with one of Nigeria's highest honors, and of course moved our Democracy Day celebration from May 29 to June 12. Well, in our studio today, we'll be bringing someone who was on the front row in the struggle for democracy. He was in the front row as Nigerians sacrificed everything, including their lives, to ensure that the military was chased away. He was also on the front row through the travails of Nigerians in the 80s and 90s, which culminated in 1999 with the coming of democracy. Clement Nwankwo, that foremost anti-military rule campaigner. We caught up with him in the course of the week, and he will be here with us to talk about those days of the military. 2 weeks ago or thereabouts, I was on vacation, and I had the opportunity of getting to the United States and, of course, getting to the United Kingdom. In the United States, I met a couple of Nigerians who had come together to see how they can help the indigent students of Nigeria. This group of Nigerians that live in where they call the Maryland area near Washington in the United States, in 1996 started a program that made it possible for them to raise money that will be used to support indigent Nigerian students. They are called the Nigerian Friendship Association. On the 2nd of June, they had the 13th edition of their annual charity golf outing. I was there, and I'll be bringing you details of how that happened in Maryland. And also, in the course of that trip, I bumped into a Lithuanian woman in Leicester in the United Kingdom. This woman in the last 10 to 12 years has become an expert in cooking Nigerian dishes. Actually, I met her in a restaurant owned by a Nigerian where this Lithuanian woman is the chief chef. But more interesting is that this woman speaks better pidgin than a lot of Nigerians. I'll be bringing you my encounter with her. But first of all, we are going to the streets to bring the reactions of Nigerians to the controversy that was raised by Mr. President when he signed the 2018 budget, when he accused the National Assembly of inserting some projects in the budget and taking away some projects as proposed by the executive. The worry of Mr. President was that some of the projects that was put forward by the National Assembly was not thought through, was not in tandem and in sync with the program and focus of the federal government. Let's hear what Nigerians are saying.
People, they believe that nothing can happen and they believe on themselves. They don't think about promises. So what I see there is that the president is saying the truth because they are not ready to work with presidency. So they only depend on their own. So that is their own. They don't mean well for Nigeria. And National Assembly, all those Senate, they are the problem of this country.
He is a president, and if he has given an allegation like this, I think it is good for the National Assembly and the presidency should sit together and discuss. Yes, if there is any addition, then there must be a reason for that. I want you to understand that the National Assembly will not do any addition if it will be detrimental to the Nigerian economy. I believe that both of them are in the same government and they are working together for the betterment of the lives of Nigerians. And if there's any addition, then I think the president should have known. And I believe that if he knows, there must be some explanations as of why those additions were made.
Well, I cannot able to exactly say why do they remove that part of the budget which is meant for the executive. We know that there must be a reason for doing that, and our wish is that if at all anything they have done by removing that part of the budget and to fixing their own, if they will do it for the purpose that will benefit the public, then that is a good thing. But if it is done with the kind of bias or with the selfish interest, then it is not at all, in fact, accepted by the public or by the people. So I believe that they will be able to look at that issue so that the executive and the legislation, they will come together and resolve those issues so that whatever that is going to be done, let it be done for the purpose of for the interests of the common masses and for the benefit of the public. And that is what we really want it to be done.
If they have not done well, he wouldn't have signed it. Even himself that signed it, if he said they didn't do well, why must he sign it? If they did not do well, he look at it and he signed it, it then means even he himself didn't do well. Therefore, automatically all of them are on the same line. How can the president sign something that is not in line with what they have proposed? So, what he signed there is what I think all of them have agreed together. That is why he signed the budget.
Nigerians reacting to the accusation by Mr. President that the National Assembly had inserted projects and removed some of the projects proposed by the federal government in the budget. Well, before I bring you our conversation with Clement Nwankwo, a pro-democracy campaigner, let me bring the activities of the Nigerian Friendship Association in the United States, who held the 13th edition of their annual charity golf outing aimed at helping indigent Nigerian students in Nigeria and in the United States of America.
Are you 18 years and above? Have you registered with the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC? Do you have your permanent voter card, PVC? If your answer is yes, what about your family members, your friends, your colleagues, and your neighbors? Remember, your vote can guarantee a better future for Nigeria and Nigerians. Your vote can make all the difference. Your vote is your power. Don't sit on the fence. Be an active citizen. This is a signature show contribution to better citizen participation in governance.
The Nigerian Friendship Association, NICFA, United States of America, held its 13th anniversary charity golf outing in support of its Friendship Association Education Assistance Program on the 2nd of June 2018. The charity golf tournament, which raises money for charitable and educational support for indigent students both in Nigeria and the United States, was initiated in 1996 by a group of Nigerians resident in the United States of America. This year, the charity golf tournament, which was declared open by the Nigerian ambassador to the United States, His Excellency Sylvester Nsofo, took place at the prestigious Worthington Manor Golf Club, Urbana, Maryland, and saw golfers from across the United States and Nigeria participating.
I would like to introduce our guest today, who's going to be to start off this occasion in the name of the new Republic of Nigerian ambassador to Washington, United States of America, Ambassador His Excellency Nsofo. I would like him to give us make a few speech, maybe a brief remark, and then before we kick off the event.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud and I feel much honored to be associated with this event, the organizers and the participants as well. Thank you very much. I welcome you all, Nigerians and Americans. This is a good cause for assisting the underprivileged children here and in America. Big thanks to you and to FAEA members. Thank you very much.
Earlier, officials of the Nigerian Friendship Association captured the essence of the charity tournament and what the money raised can do for thousands of indigent students in Nigeria. Before the tournament kicked off in earnest, the rules of the game were read.
All right, I don't know if you all got brochures. All your contests are in that. The close-knit pin, there's different divisions for men and women. There's a long drive for men and women on different holes. All four.
Picture, please. Yeah, picture. Got it. Okay. Perfect.
At the end of the tournament, prizes were presented to golfers who distinguished themselves in the competition. Quite an impressive outing by the Nigerian Friendship Association in Maryland, United States of America. Let's now bring you our conversation with Clement Nwankwo, pro-democracy campaigner. For so many Nigerians, another sigh of relief that at last someone in government is realizing that something went wrong on June 12. How do you see the gesture of Mr. President to move Democracy Day from May 29 to June 12 and to honor MKO Abiola and others with some national honors?
Very welcome. I think the President's recognition of Chief MKO Abiola has been an agitation that's been going on for a very long time. Nigerians had looked at the struggles against military rule and decided that June 12 symbolized all of the efforts that the citizens have made to ensure that this country doesn't get ruled by dictators anymore. June 12, 1993 was an important day because that was the day that General Babangida, after several rigmaroles, several deceptions and promises of returning the country to civilian rule, was the day that the elections actually held to end his rule. And when he came up again and said the elections failed to meet his own definition of free and fair, citizens said to him, "We've had enough of your abuse of us. And whatever you say about the actual elections, this particular election symbolizes the end of your rule, symbolizes the end of military dictatorship that General Babangida represented," and citizens mobilized. So coming through several years, 25 years of agitation for this date to be commemorated, especially that Chief MKO Abiola, who contested that elections, who won the elections, and who, from the date of that election, became symbolic of the fight against military rule. And in spite of his death in 1998, we did see him become symbolic of the struggle against military rule, and these agitations for that date to be commemorated have remained till the present President Buhari decided that this should be commemorated. Democracy Day, yes, it means that we have to alter by legislation the Democracy Day that we currently operate, which means that the National Assembly needs to be approached by the President because he's made a pronouncement and he said June 12 will be a date in the future, if you read his statement, which he personally signed. We want to see that future commemorated now. So beyond him pronouncing it by a press statement, we would like to see him forward to the National Assembly specific legislation on the matter to institute June 12 as Nigeria's Democracy Day, but also to retain by legislation May 29th as inauguration day of every elected official. The Constitution is quite clear on the turnaround time for persons to seek election, and although between May 29 and June 12 is a few days, we do not want to see a shift from that handover date. It has to remain as May 29th, and then Democracy Day as June 12th.
You know, for those of us that were around when June 12 happened, we seem to know everything that happened at that time. But we're talking about 25 years, a new generation of Nigerians. Can you do a recap for the benefit of some of these Nigerians? What actually happened in that period?
That was one of the worst periods in Nigeria's history. And I think that if we look at what has happened across the world, the opening up of democratic freedoms, the technological innovations and leaps and bounds of development that has occurred, and looking back 25 years to see what the military did to dehumanize Nigerians. Nigerians were not allowed to speak, and General Buhari, when he took over in 1983, made laws that were very brutal. Journalists were not allowed to publish a story if it embarrassed the government, and this is whether it is true or not. And we had journalists, two of them particularly, Tunde Thompson and Ndokai Rabo, who published a story in the Guardian newspapers, who were jailed by the military government, not because the story was false, and it was a story about the posting of ambassadors. So it was not a national security issue, but because the government felt embarrassed that the newspapers had a scoop on an intended appointment, these two journalists were jailed. And they were not jailed by regular courts. They were taken to military tribunals. We also saw these military tribunals seize politicians, and we all agree that the politicians of the Second Republic were very corrupt. But we saw military courts being set up to try these politicians. Some were jailed for 300 years by tribunals constituted by serving soldiers and military men dressed up in uniform. Lawyers protested this, and you were told, in fact, that you had to prove your innocence, not for the prosecution to prove your guilt. So the rule of law stood on its head. We had people not being able to talk, people not being able to travel. A lot of us couldn't travel out of the country. We were restricted. Our passports were seized. A friend of mine who was based in Enugu was arrested. A major mentor for me was arrested. Why? Because he said he had invented a test tube baby, Dr. Ernest Ugo. He was arrested and detained for several months under Decree Number 2 for something that had absolutely nothing to do with politics. So police officers, if they didn't like you, would see you, make a photocopy of blank copies of detention decree, fill your name, and you would rot in police cells and detention centers maintained by what was then called the Nigerian Security Organization, NSO, headed by one Rafin Dadi. So the situation that the country went through was harrowing. People were killed on the streets by agents of the state, agents of the military government. So I think, and today it's fancy to say, yes, you're an activist, you're a social media activist and so on. But it was really, for you to be an activist in the 90s, it wasn't a cocktail party. It wasn't child's play. People were killed.
Immediately after the election on June 12th, and when it filtered out that Abiola had won that election, there was a lot of jubilation across the country. There was a lot of excitement that at last Nigeria was going to see a new day, and then the annulment a couple of days later. Describe the mood.
For a lot of us and a lot of citizens, the mood was, at last, this dictator, General Babangida, would have to leave office. That's what it was soon after the results were announced. And people didn't care who it was that was to succeed him, because if you cared, then you would ask yourself, oh my God, it's a very close friend of General Babangida that has won this election, Chief MK Abiola, who had been hands in glove with the military. But citizens said, this is a break from the dictatorship of the military. We will now be ruled by a constitution. We would no longer have newspaper houses shut down, and several newspaper houses were shut down. We would no longer have our beloved ones picked up on the streets or in our homes and locked up, and nobody would ever find them. Disappearances was very high. A journalist was bombed in a room, taken to a room at the Doba Hotel in Kaduna, Bagauda Kalto, and bombed by security agencies. And when they bombed him, they threw copies of Shoyinka's book into the room to say that he was carrying seditious materials. So the mood was, finally, this country will begin to go forward. And then General Babangida spoils the mood of the country by his, again, new tale of unfair process leading up to the elections and cancelling the elections. And they even went as far as making suggestions that the candidate who won the election or who was acclaimed as winning the election was not fit to take up the position.
When you look back, how can anyone equate the cost of that annulment?
It's incredible. The cost, what it did was that the country stood still for several years. People were not making decisions, whether it's investment decisions or private life decisions. A lot of activists couldn't even live a private life, couldn't even go forward with their lives. They were stopped because they were fighting to end military rule. Businesses could not come into the country. Businesses were, in fact, heading out of the country. So in terms of development, development was stalled. The costs have been incredible. And this country would have moved miles and miles and miles ahead, years ahead, if the military did not get involved in the shenanigans of abuse of human rights and annulments of the June 12, 1993 elections.
Let's take you back to those years. What was the experience of civil society after the annulment and then that robust agitation for the will of the people to be actualized? What was the experience of people like you?
Once he annulled the elections and we all came back from Vienna, it was a struggle. Everybody felt that there was no other story that Babangida could tell, that he had told all of the stories he had to tell. Like a magician, he had sprung out all the pigeons from his hat, and this was it. And we said, enough is enough. We have to fight back. And people mobilized, were on the streets, students, media, and of course his clampdown began. We worked with the labor unions, we worked with students, we worked with the media, and everybody was out there saying, this country must return to civilian rule, and Babangida's time was up. And it was all of that struggle, all of that pressure, all of the people on the streets, all of the businesses shut down. The economy was shut down. And in 1993, the economy was Lagos. All of this was shut down. And Babangida realized that he couldn't go on any further. And he set up a scrappy interim national government headed by his friend, Ernest Shonekon, a businessman, and asked him to be head of the interim national government. And he left the presidential villa to return to Minna. But as history sees, he left behind a worse dictator. He left General Sani Abacha as Chief of Army Staff and created a contraption that made General Sani Abacha the real power behind Ernest Shonekon. Civil society, Nigerian citizens saw that, of course, this was a contraption aimed at keeping the military in power still, removing the face of Babangida and replacing it with General Sani Abacha. And so the agitation continued. And it was at that stage that we then saw that the military had to bring forward what its real plans were. And what they did was scrap the interim government, and General Sani Abacha organized his own final coup and took over power in November of 1993, making himself head of state.
Well, the period that Abacha was in power was one of the worst times for civil society and civil rights in Nigeria. And I've never stopped wondering, what was the driving force for those of you in civil society, even as death, assassination stared you in the face? What spurred you? What was that thing that, made ordinary Nigerians without guns and machetes to look Abacha in the eye and say, we disagree with you?
I think that there was a lot of unity within the NGO community at the time. There was a lot of agreement within the community that we needed to work together to save this country. There was a lot of idealism, and people behaved and acted as if they had nothing to lose. We gave our all. You were with a colleague and you see your colleague being arrested, or you being arrested and your colleague carrying on. We would go to meetings and we would see colleagues being arrested. I was at a lunch, waiting to have lunch with Kudirat Abiola and a few other activists, and in the middle of waiting for her, we couldn't wait any longer, so we started our lunch, and then a few minutes after, the message came that she had just been shot on the streets, driving to the venue of the lunch. And for a lot of us, this is, one of the things, rather than scare us, we felt incensed, we felt angry that this was going on in our country. And at some stage, we decided, well, what was the point living in a country where you couldn't be a full citizen? And so for us, it was, we either end this or we end with it. And that was the motivation for a lot of people. There was no fear about the military. Of course, you took basic precautions to avoid being arrested, but you also knew that if you were arrested, that was it. That was part of the struggle. That was part of the sacrifice that was made. So for a lot of people, the media, for instance, I'd never seen such incredible commitment from the media. Media houses were shut down. People found alternative venues to print. And it's not today that you have social media. People had to print physical newsprint copies of newspapers to circulate. And so people would go to Shomolu, a printing area, and get a printer to print. Some magazines, the weekly magazines, were printing in London and ferrying it in surreptitiously and distributing. So there was a whole lot of incredible commitment. And people were not doing it because of money. A lot of the media houses were not making money from what they were selling, the newspapers they were selling, because it was barely enough to pay their costs. People couldn't use conventional physical spaces anymore. You were using hideouts. People couldn't live a normal life in this country. You basically knew that you were in hiding 24/7. A lot of us who had to do the international diplomacy found that we couldn't go through the airports. So what do? You keep your passport in Ghana or in some other neighboring country. You then go through the land borders without being checked. And if you want to go out, you do the same. So for a lot of people, the sacrifice was incredible. not as we see today. Today is a completely different kettle of fish. In the 90s, it was completely different.
You enjoyed front row during this period. I mean, you met, and a good number of them that lost their lives one-on-one. You were at a lunch waiting for Kudirat, only for you to get the message that she was shot. We remember Iwane, we remember a whole lot of people. Of course, we remember someone like Ken Saro-Wiwa, who lost his life because for a lot of people, he was also agitating. How did you feel as a person, as Clement Nwankwo? How did you feel knowing that people that were in the same business with you were dying and that you could be shot or eliminated at any minute?
It was always a realization that was there all the time, that you were in constant danger. Ken Saro-Wiwa was with me heading to Vienna for the World Conference on Human Rights, and by the time I crossed the immigration, he couldn't cross. He was stopped. And this was in 1993. He was stopped right there at the airport. And there was a lot. By the time we got to Vienna, we started a whole campaign to allow for the Nigerian government to allow Ken to come to Vienna. He only arrived in Vienna a couple of days after the event had started. It was the same with Gani Fahimi. We were in meetings, and Gani Fahimi, for instance, was someone who never hid. You knew where to find him. And so he was constantly being arrested because he wasn't prepared to hide. And one of the good things with his being arrested was that it again mobilized, resurged civil society, human rights agitations for his release. He became a major symbol for a lot of us, because once he got arrested, the tempo rose really high. And surprised that nobody ever advised the government at the time that a lot of this arrest meant that the tempo rose in terms of agitations, in terms of drawing international community's attention to the crisis of Nigeria. Seeing a lot of colleagues being arrested, being killed, meant that you did what, as a human being, you could do to take whatever precautions you could afford to take. But it didn't stop you from continuing to agitate, because you know that if you give up, you will be part of that list of people who were killed. And the struggle is to ensure that this country comes out of that stage where people were just being shot on the streets for no reason.
Let's come to the present. The president says, or rather has honored Abiola, has honored the man that was his running mate, King Gibe, has honored the acclaimed, icon of the fight against democracy, Gani Fahimi. But that has opened floodgates of anger and demand by so many that a lot of people that should also have been honored have not been honored. Some people talk about Professor Humphrey Musu, for instance, and then the countless others, Kudirat, who gave her life, was not honored, and countless others that sacrificed so much for June 12th to be realized. Do you think there's justification in that anger?
I think that for a lot of us who fought for June 12, it wasn't a search for honor. It wasn't a search for recognition. It was a fight for freedom. It was a fight for Nigeria. And I don't think that if Kudirat, for instance, was alive today, that and the elections had been allowed to stand, I don't think that, in fact, since the elections were annulled, I don't think that her concern would be about not being honored personally. I think it would be that this country takes the lessons the biggest honor you can give to Kudirat, to Rewane, to Omashola, who was bombed at the airport in Lagos, Bagauda Kalto, the countless Nigerians who were killed, and there are lots and lots of them. Olisa Bakoba, who had a black eye from the attack in Yaba by the military during the demonstrations. The biggest honor you can give to everyone that fought for democracy and fought for the realization of June 12 is to look at the principles that June 12 represented. The principles of accountability, the principles of transparency, the principles of respect for human rights and the rule of law, and the principles of democratic practices that all of this meant, and take it forward. So when you as a government says you are honoring Chief MK Abiola, you are honoring Ganifa Emil, who spent all of his professional life fighting for justice, when you are honoring them, you should honor the values that they represent. And the question for us is to ask, are those in power today respecting those values? The evidence is there to say no.
So would you agree with a lot of people who say that the gesture of Mr. President, yes, a step in the right direction, is just one first step?
It is important to recognize struggles that people make, because what it does is not for those that made the struggle, it's for those who are coming behind, to know that there are sacrifices that you can make, there are contributions that you can make that will be valued by society. So for me, it's not an issue of receiving accolades, it's an issue of the country knowing that in honoring those that have made those sacrifices, you are sending lessons to those coming behind to know that they could contribute to a bigger, better, much more developed Nigeria, and that the country would value it. And that's what the president needs to do, that's what the politicians need to do, to ensure that they serve the country. Being a president, being a governor, being a legislator is not about serving your ethnic group. Chief Abiola, in winning the elections, won elections across the country, getting votes from the remotest parts of the country. The charity work he had been doing across the country that knew no tribe, no ethnic group, no religion, was what propelled Nigerians to vote for him, and that was what propelled Nigerians to support June 12. And I think the lesson for those in office today is to look back to the life of Chief MK Abiola and the values that he represented in being a pan-Nigerian. This government at the center is not being a pan-Nigerian government. And that's been the anger of Nigerians. That the government is not bringing in the best resources, the best human resources available to drive the country forward. And I'm not talking about having 36 ministers from the 36 states. I'm talking about who constitutes your inner cabinet, your inner decision making when you are withdrawn from everybody else. And if those that constitute that are from your ethnic group or your religion alone, then you have no understanding of what it means to be a pan-Nigerian. And perhaps that's the crisis that this country is faced with today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are you 18 years and above? Have you registered with the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC? Do you have your permanent voter card, PVC? If your answer is yes, what about your family members, your friends, your colleagues, and your neighbors? Remember, your vote can guarantee a better future for Nigeria and Nigerians. Your vote can make all the difference. Your vote is your power. Don't sit on the fence. Be an active citizen. This is a signature show contribution to better citizen participation in governance.
And before we end our program, let me take you to faraway Leicester in the United Kingdom, where a Lithuanian woman is making waves as the chief chef in a restaurant called The Hind, a wave-making bar and restaurant specializing in making Nigerian dishes. Esther, who has lived in the United Kingdom for about 14, 15 years, not only prepares Nigerian dishes, but speaks fluent Nigerian pidgin English. You cook African food, Nigerian food?
Yes, most of Igbo food.
Mostly Igbo food?
Yes.
So where did you learn this?
It's from my ex-fiance. He taught me how to cook Nigerian food, which personally, when I tasted it first time, I really liked it. So I forced him to teach me, and which he done it. It took me around 1 year to learn. But now I start cooking for restaurants. Before I cooked for people in my house, they come, they pick it up. So now I finally open a Nigerian restaurant with my all African food here now.
So how long have you been doing this?
Around 8 to 10 years now.
Okay, which of the foods, Nigerian foods, do you cook?
I do banga soup, I do oha soup, okra soup, idikaikon, ogbono, fish, tilapias, grilled fish, moi mois, jollof rice, normal rice, white rice, stew, fried seasoned fish, goat meat, which is like a more snack meat, but goat meat with sauce. Yeah, little food.
Almost everything.
Little bit.
And you know, the one that really thrills me is not that you just cook Nigerian food, you also you have copied, you know, Nigerian way of life, especially when you speak pidgin English. So how you did now?
I didn't fancy.
So what is going to happen now?
I don't think. I prepare pepper soup, which my customer wants pepper soup, and goat meat pepper soup. So yes, let me check the pepper soup.
So which time you can learn this pidgin way they speak so?
Where or how long? At the same time, since I start cooking, because I love Nigerian tradition, which is really nice Nigerian tradition.
So like this one, because of so that it can be fast, you prepare them and then put them in the fridge for a while?
Yes, I do pepper soup, goat pepper soup, let's say like last night, yesterday. Then I portion it. Then one customer order, I just bring them out, warm it. It's all seasoned, it's all meated. So, okay, Abeg, come. Your pepper soup done already. Auntie? Okay.
Yes.
Omo pepper dey o. Dey plenty o, eh? Na pepper soup.
Do.
Pepper dey there. Pepper dey. Sorry o.
I go follow them chop this your food. Make I know whether they taste like Nigerian food, sha.
You go taste them all.
Okay, we go sit down. We go cook, give me food. Make I follow them chop, I beg. Hey.
Sir.
Make I follow your people eat now.
Oh yeah?
Give me water, make I wash them, I beg. Wash them. Make I taste them first.
Taste them.
If I get talk, I can talk that time.
You know, wherever I go, actually, you know, I move her from wherever I am because she knows the business, she does the business, and she doesn't cut corner. She's not in a cutting corner way.
So, and as you can see, the venue here, she's the manager. This is the person managing this place for me. So.
While these actors make it through tonight, ladies and gents, a round of applause. It's Paul.
It was really my pleasure meeting Esther, and I must confess, I enjoyed her food too. And that's where we're drawing the curtain on our show today. Don't forget, you can see the show again or any of our shows if you go to our online platform, signaturetv.com.ng. Don't also forget that you can reach us on any of our social platforms. You can also email us, or you can call us and talk about the things you want to see on our show, or even criticize some of the things we do on the Signature Show. We're here to serve you. We're here to make sure that what you watch is what you love. And until same time next week at 2 p.m. Sunday, I am Vin Martin Obiora Ilo from the Signature Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you for watching and asking you to keep a date with us